Look what we have here. Did you get lost on your way to the 4-H fair, little lady? The words, slick with sarcasm, echoed across the firing range. The crowd of hardened recruits, all broad shoulders and jutting jaws, erupted in a wave of nervous laughter. It was a cruel sound, the kind that seeks to bond a group by excluding one of its members. The target of their derision, a young woman named Alara Vance, didn't so much as flinch. She stood small in her borrowed fatigues, her frame looking almost fragile against the backdrop of concrete and steel. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, functional bun, revealing a face devoid of makeup and a gaze that seemed fixed on something far beyond the dusty range. She offered no retort, no defensive posture, no flicker of anger or humiliation. Her silence was a vacuum, and the sergeant's arrogance rushed in to fill it. She simply reached for the rifle on the rack, her movements economical and sure. But across the range, behind the tinted observation glass, Colonel Magnus Thorne leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. He was a man who had seen 3 decades of war, a man for whom posture and process told a deeper story than any service record. He didn't see a lost farm girl. He saw a stance, feet perfectly shoulder-width apart, a low center of gravity, a subtle but profound connection to the earth beneath her. He saw the way her hands met the cold steel of the M210, not with the tentative touch of a novice, but with the quiet familiarity of a master craftsman greeting an old tool. If you believe respect is earned, not given, type proven in the comments below. The instructor, a barrel-chested sergeant named Deckard, paced before the line of shooters, relishing his role as the gatekeeper of this elite world. He was the kind of man whose confidence was built on the intimidation of others. "This is the advanced qualification, people," he barked, his voice a gravelly roar. "We're not shooting at barn doors. This is a cold-bore shot at 800 meters, with a variable crosswind. This shot separates the warriors from the tourists." His eyes landed on Vance again, a predator spotting easy prey. "This isn't like shooting tin cans off a fence post, sweetheart. This rifle, the M210 enhanced sniper rifle, weighs more than your opinion. You feel that wind? That'll push a 175-grain projectile 3 feet to the left if you don't account for it. Can you even do that math in your head?" He paused for another laugh, which came, albeit weaker this time. The other recruits shifted uncomfortably, the sport of it beginning to sour. Vance remained a statue of calm. She methodically racked the bolt, checking the chamber with a practiced efficiency that was utterly at odds with her unassuming appearance. Her silence seemed to infuriate Deckard more than any argument could. He saw her gently tap the side of the optic. "Don't worry," he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "The pointy end goes that way still." She said nothing. Her focus was absolute, her world shrinking to the machine in her hands and the impossible distance to the target. The formal challenge began. One by one, the recruits took their positions. The wind whipped across the range, a fickle and invisible enemy. The air crackled with tension. When it was Vance's turn, she didn't just lie down. She seemed to merge with the ground, her body creating a stable, solid platform as if she were carved from the same rock as the mountains in the distance. The narrative of the moment shifted from the loud sergeant to the silent woman. Every action was a testament to a discipline forged far from this place. Her breathing slowed, a deep, rhythmic cadence that was almost meditative. Her pulse, had anyone been able to measure it, would have been steady as a drumbeat. Her hands, which Deckard had implicitly mocked, moved with an astonishing grace. They were calloused, yes, but they were the hands of a surgeon or a concert pianist. She adjusted the parallax on the scope with a touch so delicate it was barely perceptible. She didn't pull out a wind meter or a ballistics calculator. Instead, she watched. She watched the subtle dance of the heat mirage rising from the ground. She watched a blade of grass tremble 100 yards away. She watched the gentle sway of the tattered flag at the far end of the range. Deckard scoffed audibly. "Going to wish the bullet there, are we?" he muttered to another instructor. He saw primitive guesswork. Colonel Thorne, from his perch, saw a communion with the environment, an instinctual calculation that no computer could replicate. The world fell away. For Alara Vance, there was only the rifle, her breath, and the distant, circular speck of steel. The weight of dozens of pairs of eyes, the pressure of Deckard's relentless scorn, the whipping wind. It all dissolved into an irrelevant background hum. Her entire being contracted into the space between her eye and the scope's reticle. She exhaled a long, slow, controlled release of air, emptying her lungs until she reached the natural respiratory pause, that perfect, still moment of metabolic calm where the body is most stable. The trigger didn't snap. It seemed to simply yield to the pressure of her finger, a final, logical step in a flawless sequence. The report of the rifle was not a violent explosion, but a single, crisp, authoritative crack that sliced through the air. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the echo and the deafening silence of anticipation. Then it came, a sound that traveled 800 meters back to them, faint but unmistakable. A clear, high-pitched ping. It was the sound of perfection. A collective gasp rippled through the recruits. The electronic monitor beside the firing lane flashed, confirming what their ears had just told them. A red light blinked next to a single word, center. Deckard stood frozen, his jaw slack. His entire framework of judgment, his carefully constructed hierarchy of strength and weakness, had been obliterated by a single piece of lead. No, he whispered, the sound swallowed by the wind. No way. That's a fluke. That's impossible. Colonel Thorne descended from the observation tower like an eagle from its eyrie. His boots crunched on the gravel with a rhythmic authority that commanded immediate attention. The recruits stiffened, their eyes locked forward. Deckard snapped out of his stupor, his face a confused mask of shock and dawning dread. The colonel didn't even glance at him. His gaze, sharp and analytical, was fixed on Vance. She was already in the process of clearing her weapon, ejecting the spent casing with a fluid motion, her expression as serene and unreadable as it had been from the start. Thorne walked past the firing line, past the stunned recruits, and stopped at the rangemaster's station. He picked up the clipboard holding the day's roster, his finger tracing down the list until it stopped on one name, Vance Ilera. He looked up, his voice calm, but carrying the unassailable weight of command. He addressed the nervous rangemaster. "Son," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I need you to pull up Specialist Vance's full service record. Authorization, Thorne 01 Alpha. The alphanumeric code was a master key, one that unlocked the deepest, most shielded corners of the military's personnel database. A shiver of apprehension went through the assembled soldiers. They were about to learn that they were not in the presence of a recruit, but of something else entirely. The rangemaster's fingers flew across the keyboard, his hands trembling slightly. Deckard had drifted closer, drawn by a morbid curiosity, his face pale. The file materialized on the screen, a wall of blacked-out lines and cryptic acronyms. But some sections were clear, and they painted a picture that defied belief. The narrator's voice could have read it aloud, each word a hammer blow to Deckard's shattered ego. Name, Vance Ilera M. Rank, Specialist. Previous unit, Classified. Combat deployments, Redacted. Special qualifications, Graduate, Project Chimera. Marksmanship commendations, First place, All-Service International Sniper Competition, 3 consecutive years. The words Project Chimera hung in the air, thick with mystery. It was a name spoken only in whispers in the intelligence community, a ghost program. Colonel Thorne turned to the assembled crowd, his gaze sweeping over them before landing hard on Deckard. For those of you who don't know, Thorne's voice was now cold steel. Project Chimera isn't a unit you apply for. It's a program that finds you. They recruit the top 0.1% of marksmen from across all Allied Special Operations Forces. They don't just teach them to shoot. They teach them the physics of a single breath, the mathematics of the wind. They turn them into ghosts who can shape a battlefield from a mile away. He then turned back to Vance, his expression softening into one of profound, professional respect. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. Specialist Vance, an honor to have you with us. Finally, he looked directly at Deckard, his eyes like chips of ice. Sergeant, assumptions are the mother of all failures. Class dismissed. The story didn't just spread, it detonated. It moved through the barracks like wildfire, transmitted in hushed tones in the mess hall and in awe-filled posts on secure forums. The legend of the farm girl from Chimera, who humbled Sergeant Deckard, became an instant classic, a piece of institutional folklore. It served as a potent cautionary tale for every NCO who thought their rank gave them the right to judge, and as a beacon of hope for every quiet professional who felt overlooked. The specific spot on the firing line where she had taken her shot was quickly and unofficially christened Vance's Point. New recruits would walk by it with a kind of reverence, some even reaching down to touch the patch of dirt where she had lain, as if hoping to absorb some of her impossible calm. A week later, Deckard approached Vance as she ate alone in the chow hall. The swagger was gone, replaced by a deep, painful-looking humility. There was no public spectacle. He stood before her, his head slightly bowed. "Specialist," he said, his voice quiet and hoarse. "I was wrong. I was unprofessional. I apologize." It was a genuine admission, stripped of all ego. Vance looked up from her meal, her expression neutral. She simply nodded once. "Understood, Sergeant." She didn't offer absolution or scorn. The apology was for him, not for her. Her worth was never in question, so his validation was unnecessary. Her quiet acceptance was, in its own way, the final lesson. Alara Vance's presence began to subtly reshape the culture of the training base. She became a silent mentor, a gravitational center for those who felt they didn't fit the traditional mold. A young, nervous recruit who was struggling with his marksmanship found the courage to approach her. She didn't give him a lecture or a speech. She simply took him to the range after hours. Instead of barking orders about sight picture and trigger squeeze, she had him close his eyes and just listen, to the wind, to the distant sounds, to the rhythm of his own heartbeat. She brought out a single coin and had him practice balancing it on the end of his rifle barrel for an hour to teach him true steadiness, a technique she'd learned on her family's farm to develop patience. She wasn't teaching him how to operate a weapon. She was teaching him how to become part of his environment, how to achieve a state of total calm and focus. Her methods were unorthodox, but undeniably effective. Colonel Thorne watched from afar, a small, satisfied smile on his face. He knew that one specialist, through a single act of profound and quiet competence, had done more to improve the quality of his instructors and the spirit of his trainees than a dozen top-down directives ever could. The lesson was clear. True authority doesn't come from the volume of your voice, but from the undeniable proof of your skill. A year passed. A new class of recruits stood on the same range, the sun beating down on them. A different instructor stood before them, a man who had witnessed Deckard's humbling. He pointed to the far end of the range. "That lane," he said, his voice firm but respectful, "is Vance's Point. Let me tell you a story." The legend of the quiet farm girl had become part of the official curriculum, a foundational lesson in humility. Before you judge someone by their size, their gender, or how quiet they are, you watch, the instructor continued. You listen, because you never know when you are standing in the presence of a ghost. You never know when you are standing next to a legend. Alara Vance was long gone, reassigned to some classified corner of the world where her skills were needed. She left no forwarding address, no personal effects, but her legacy was etched into the very soul of the institution. In the main briefing room, where strategies were planned and missions were born, a single photograph hung on the wall. It wasn't of a person, but of a piece of steel, scarred with a single, perfect hole directly in its center. Beneath it, a small, polished brass plaque bore only one word: proven. True legacy, it turned out, wasn't a statue or a medal. It was a standard. It was the silence you command, the respect you earn through action, and the quiet inspiration that pushes others to be better long after you have moved on. The quiet farm girl never sought recognition. She never raised her voice, never boasted of her incredible talents, and never demanded the respect she was owed. Her power was not in what she said, but in what she did. Her silence was not a sign of weakness, but the ultimate expression of confidence, a deep, unshakable knowledge of her own worth that required no external validation. She walked onto that range as an object of ridicule and left as a legend, not by changing who she was, but by forcing the world around her to change its ignorant assumptions. Her single, perfect shot was a rebuttal to every bully, every gatekeeper, every person who ever judged a book by its cover. It was a testament to the enduring power of competence, a reminder that in the moments that truly matter, actions will always speak louder than words. The story of Alara Vance became a permanent fixture in the institution's memory, a powerful lesson that the most capable, most professional, and most dangerous people are often the ones you underestimate the most. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud ignorance, and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.